This is TWiT.
I guess we should probably talk about this. Elizabeth Warren, candidate for Democratic nomination for president in 2020. The election's coming. Says we should break up the tech giants, including Apple. I don't think she thought out the Apple part all that well. And I would point you to, as always, a great Ben Thompson article in Stratechery in which he says Warren is wrong. He does praise her for kind of thinking about how much power our big tech companies have, too much power over our economy. He just says that breaking them up may have some really hideous unintended consequences. Yeah. And I kind of agree.
So I had that same thought, and then I talked to Nilay today for tomorrow's Vector, so I got a chance to ask him about the interview. And the breakup part is getting a lot of the attention, but she seems like she has a 4-point plan where, depending on how valuable you are, different things kick in. Like if you make, I forget the number, but if you make only $20 billion, you're cut up. Yeah, you're fine.
But that runs directly contrary to actual U.S. law, which doesn't say you're too big, you have to be broken up.
Yes.
You have to be a monopoly to be broken up. There is no current law that says, "Oh, you're worth $100 trillion. We got to break you up. You're too big."
The U.S. is like common welfare, and the EU is competition based. They have very different antitrust systems. She's introducing a third one, which she thinks could be less expensive than having a bunch, like having Judge Judy Ko in charge of saying but on the value of the company and the size of the ecosystem. And again, like I don't think any of these ideas scale because, for example, at Apple's size, they should not be allowed. And her assertion is they have too much access to data and to positioning to be allowed to offer apps on their own store. They should not be allowed to compete.
Yeah, this seems to be her biggest problem, which makes this, by the way, makes zero sense.
But like Walmart has access to data and to shelving positions that they're like Procter & Gamble don't. And should Microsoft not be allowed to sell Halo? Should Bungie be spun off and everyone should get hit?
I think there's a good case to be made that Google shouldn't have YouTube because it's going to just mess with the search results.
It's the number 1 and 2 search engines in the world.
I think you can make that case, but it doesn't make any sense that Apple shouldn't sell apps in its own app store. That makes no sense at all.
Well,
maybe
them,
she wants to say other stores should be able to sell apps on the iPhone. That would make more sense that there should be multiple stores. Well, but that reduces security significantly. So
see, that's why this most of what her campaign has committed to is in a Medium post that she published, or her election campaign or whatever published. And one of the points that she's making is that it's particularly as relates to Apple, is that it's wrong given that Apple makes money off of every purchase off the App Store, it's wrong for them to lock their devices to just one App Store. They should allow people to either sideload apps or allow other app stores to App Store apps to be installed on the device. So I mean, it's not as though what she's saying doesn't make any sense. It's just that it really does, to my eyes, it comes across at this point as campaign rhetoric as opposed to a well thought out vision of digital policy. I think that in the long run, what she's proposing is going to hurt more consumers than it helps, because she's trying to apply 100-year-old ideas of trust busting to a 2019 technological marketplace, and the two aren't really compatible. And when she does really mention about the breakup of monopolies, she talks about like AT&T, for instance. And the thing is, the reason why this was AT&T was originally a government granted monopoly. It wasn't that maybe they acted like robber barons, but at some point the government said that AT&T until like 1984, you're exempt from antitrust because it's so important that we have this phone system and telegraph system in place, and it's going to be so expensive to put in that we'll reach more people, and we need this thing built up, and the only way to do it is to not have 18 different competing telephone networks. So it's in the public's best interest to allow this trust to continue. I think that it would be appropriate for them to say that there are certain huge companies like Google, but not Facebook, where yes, Google making so much money off of ads and having so many products that allow them to place ads and to collect more information to make their ad database more valuable. is beneficial to consumers because this is what gives us Google Maps for free. This is what gives us Google Docs for free. This is what gives us Chromebooks and Android devices that are very, very cheap to produce because they are essentially giving away the operating system for free. It's a big enough benefit to consumers that we can allow this particular company to exist the way it is. Facebook, I think, would be a different thing because they just make it so clear that they don't care about anything that they do, as long as it keeps the fire hose of information going into the giant holding tanks in Facebook's campus. So I prefer to read this proposal as, again, here is a early campaign statement, campaign rhetoric thing that if she became the actual Democratic nominee, she would have to release a very long 100-page PDF with all kinds of other academics and engineers who signed off on this thing to actually outline how she could do this without ensuring that it doesn't cost us 18 cents a mile to navigate using any sort of a Google Maps sort of product.
This whole campaign, I think, is just kind of like looking at the wrong things that we need to fight when it comes to technology. Right now, the most important thing that we need to do is protect our data and our security. And there should be procedures and regulations in place to take care of that, not to break up these big tech companies. That should be so farther down the line that she should be standing on a platform of enforcing some sort of methodology toward transparency for how these major companies are collecting our data. I think that Elizabeth Warren is incredible, and I think that I'm confused when I read this as to where she came up with this idea to make this the thing that she stands on right now, when there are so many other things that are more important that should be tackled first.
I think you nailed it.
Absolutely.
This is the wrong battle to fight. Thompson quotes Mike Masnick on this. He says, Mike says, none of this is to say we shouldn't be concerned about big internet companies with too much power. It's a perfectly reasonable concern. But just because you want to do something and this is something doesn't mean it's the something we should do. And I'd be much more interested in a candidate who had concrete proposals on how to protect our data and our privacy going forward than, oh, let's just chop it all up, because the consequences, that's a massive undertaking. Yeah. It's probably a non-starter, and the consequences are unknown and undoubtedly significant. Whereas I think you could reasonably get up in front of Congress, a newly elected president, and say, we've got to enact privacy legislation, and we've got to do it now. And I think that actually that's the will of the people and the will of most of the Congress right now.
Yeah, and I hope this doesn't come across as ageist. Maybe it is. I don't think it is. But this is why I don't think our next chief executive and the majority of our Congress people should be people who are 69 or 70 years old. It's the fact that her first huge public statement about this uses the language of antitrust, which is something that has been a known problem for decades, as opposed to the subtleties of technology, I think is a little telling, and at least prejudices me to continue to think that even people who are my age, I'm Generation X, which means that I grew up with computers, I grew up with the internet, even I grew up with email. But I absolutely did not grow up with a device in my pocket that keeps me connected all the time. I didn't. It took me a little while even to get the hang of text messaging, because I didn't know, do I have to say goodbye? No, really, the conversation just, even if we don't continue this conversation for 10 days, it's all one conversation. Wow. And that these are things that you have to grow up with with a certain thing. You have to grow up in a certain world, as opposed to getting accustomed to a new world. When it comes to making policy about how big a tech company should allow to become, what privacy controls, what privacy rights should be, what surveillance rights should be, this is where you need somebody who is in their 30s or 40s or even younger than that. This is exactly not something right, something that I should be doing.
You're exactly right with that. We have every time something comes up in government where they're trying to figure out what technology is doing, and they go and they ask all those questions in their meetings and their hearings, it's terrible because they don't know what they're talking about. But the younger people come up and join the government officials. They know a lot more than these older generations do about how to navigate technology, and they have just a better understanding of it just because, like you said, they grew up with phones in their pockets. They were 5 when they started using technology as opposed to 15 or something like that. And right now, the people that are in office don't understand technology enough to even ask the right questions to get to the right place. They're just kind of in this big, what are you doing? What do you do? How come when I do a search on Google, what I look for doesn't come up? Well, we don't know. Technology is so much bigger and deeper than that. And we definitely need younger generations that will grow up into these government officials that have a much better understanding of the way technology works before we can start attacking how they're doing business and what they can do, what they should be doing differently.